everyone. I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today we are going to talk about how elitism hurts the writing community and the publishing industry. Now, you may be wondering, what exactly do I mean by this? What is elitism, and how exactly does that hurt the writing community and the publishing industry? So elitism has been around since forever, and it's constantly changing. The goalposts are constantly changing, but at its core, it basically means people who think that they're better writers or better authors for completely arbitrary reasons. And there's a difference between recognizing that you're an exceptional writer or author, exceptionally talented, exceptionally hardworking, exceptionally successful, There's nothing wrong with those factual things. What is wrong with elitism is when people utilize it as a tool in order to put others down for, as I said, completely arbitrary reasons. Let me give you all an example. So a common thing that I have seen on a lot of writing forums, whether it's unpublished writers or published authors, is this weird belief that if you are a self-published author, meaning that you don't go through a traditional publishing house, that you're somehow less than, and that you're not a legitimate author, and that your writing must be bad. This whole idea of, well, obviously you couldn't get a traditional publishing house to publish you because your writing is bad, so that's why you had to publish it yourself, and all indie writers are bad, all of that. And also the elitism of, oh, you only got published at this level instead of this level, even with traditionally publishing. Oh, it's a smaller publishing house. It's not, one of the big houses like Random House or Penguin or whatever. You can always one-up somebody with this nonsense. And that's what it is nonsense. Because at the end of the day, while being traditionally published is a huge gold star on your resume, I mean, kind of fortunately, unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, in today's climate, being traditionally published really isn't that relevant or helpful anymore. Way back in the day, before the days of being able to self-publish on platforms such as Ingram and Amazon and all of the other places where you can essentially be your own master of your work, there were two different avenues. There was being traditionally published at various levels, small indie publishing companies, smaller publishing houses, and big-time publishing houses, and everything in between, or what's known as vanity publishing. Vanity publishing is today seen as a scam because it honestly is at this point. It's where you pay a company to publish your work, and that's about it. You literally just pay them to make your book into a book. You have to do all of the selling. You have to do all of the marketing. It's like, thanks, I have to pay for the privilege of having my book be a book. And this is part of where that elitism comes from today, is especially with the old guard. So people who are of the older generation don't really see the difference between vanity publishing and self-publishing these days. I've run across several people in that older age group where when they find out that I have self-published some of my works, they have automatically jumped to just internet yelling at me in all caps, how much did you pay for your precious book? And I'm like, well, I paid the layout artist, I paid the cover artist, I paid my editor. Do you want to know how much I paid for those things? And they're like, no, how much did you pay your publisher? And I'm like, sweetheart, what part of self-publishing are you not understanding? I didn't pay anybody. I just clicked a button and my book is published, the end. That doesn't cost anything. And they just can't wrap their brains around that. So that's where part of this elitism comes from, is that they are seeing this older thing, vanity publishing, as the same thing as self-publishing. Now, back in the day before vanity publishing was so much the scam it is today, because even back then it was kind of a scam, but it wasn't as bad as it is today, especially with self-publishing. It's kind of like, why would you waste your money doing that? Just very silly. But back then, that was the only other avenue that you had. And it was viewed very much as, oh, you're paying essentially this scammer to publish your book for you, whether it's you are too lazy to get it traditionally published, or your writing's not good enough to be traditionally published, or insert any sort of bad reason here. And that's very much carried over today with the old older generation, the old guard. That's how they view it. So that's why. What they don't really realize is back in the day, and still with a lot of publishing houses today, unfortunately, it's very hard for minority voices to be heard, and it's very hard to get minority voices' stories published. What I mean by that is writing by people of color, writing by people in the LGBTQ community, people who are religions other than Christianity. And if any of the books are about any of that as their subject matter, it is so much more difficult to get published by a traditional publishing house in those arenas than it is if you are a standard Christian white man or just a white man in general, writing about very just typical topics. The literary world, traditional sci-fi, traditional fantasy, all that. The only genre that's a little bit flipped is romance. You're far more likely to be published in romance if you're a white woman, especially if you're a white Christian woman writing with a Christian slant. Christian fiction is just like, woo, that stuff just like, so many publishing houses just eat that stuff up. It's a very popular, I don't want to say easy because I feel like that's the wrong word. It's just that there are far fewer challenges in your way, if that's the subject matter. But all of these minority subject matters, and especially if you, the author, are one of these minorities, even if you're writing very standard literary stuff, if you're writing very standard Christian stuff, if you're a Black author, if you're a Latinx author, if you're an LGBTQ author, if you're a Muslim author, any of those things, it's automatically so much more difficult for you to get published. And that's just the unfortunate reality we live in. And it was so much worse back in the day when you only had those two options. So having the route of self-publishing today has enabled us to completely open the market so that we finally can read stories from these amazing perspectives that really haven't been explored up until recent years. Yeah, sure, there have been books in the past that have explored these things, but not to the volume and extent of today. So many books from back then have been sanitized to a certain degree so that people will feel more comfortable reading them. Whereas when you're self-published, you don't have to worry about feelings and you can literally just write whatever you want to write, feelings be damned. That's part of where that elitism comes from. And the way that that hurts both the writing community and the publishing industry is, from what I just said, is when we apply that elitism, we are literally gatekeeping all of these minorities and their perspectives. When we live on these pillars of, oh, you have to be, published by this publishing house and you can't be self-published and you have to win literary awards and da-da-da and all of that. When we follow that kind of elitism, we are just narrowing down everything considered good books to a very, very small scope. And that's not really what writing is about. Writing is meant to be about exploring all different forms of perspective and ideas and experiences and being able to hear those stories from different kinds of people. It's an art form. It can be as true as you want it to be. It can be as fantastical as you want it to be. And when we open up that gate and allow everyone in, we get all different kinds of amazing stories, as we're seeing today. Unfortunately, the flip side of opening those doors and letting everyone in is we also let the trash in too. And that's another part of where this elitism comes in, is it's very easy for people who fall under this viewpoint of elitism to lump everyone in with the trash. And don't get me wrong, it is so frustrating to see all of those posts on writing community forums of how do I write a book? How do I get published? When do I get paid? When do I become a next bestseller? Blah, blah, blah. All of those dumb questions that we've all heard 1,000 times. And they're most of the time asked by people who have no business being in the publishing industry. Not to sound like an elitist myself or anything. It's just that with the boom of self-publishing, and then unfortunately with the changing landscape with AI and ChatGPT and all that stuff, we have let a lot of garbage in the door. And right now, there isn't really a good solution that will enable us to be able to keep that gate open to be able to have wider perspective and wider opportunity for different kinds of writers, but still being able to filter out this garbage. And that's kind of where we're at right now in the industry, is that we are in this big transition era where we have so many people more than ever who are excited to be a part of the writing industry. And I think that that's so exciting that we have so many people never before that are so excited about books. And now more than ever, we need people to read books. Books are so important. They are one of the foundations of being an educated person, is being able to understand different perspectives, being able to read historical and cultural information, just all of these opportunities for learning that books afford. But unfortunately, there are so many people that have no formal training in writing, which you don't necessarily need, but it certainly helps. But then also, on top of not having formal training, they also don't write. And I know how weird that sounds. How are these people wanting to write books and they don't write? I've mentioned this in my other videos, are people who they just kind of vomit out their thoughts into a document and they're like, it's a book now, and then send it on its merry way. And they don't do any editing. They don't even read it over. They don't even use spell check, which is easy and free. They don't have anyone else look it over. And they don't understand character development. They don't understand plot arc. They don't understand writing for an audience. They don't understand any of these basic components that are required in order to write a successful book. And when I say successful, I don't necessarily mean monetarily or awards or anything like that. When I say successful, I mean that someone can pick up this book and read it and understand it and enjoy it. That is a successful book, is that it's a book being a book. Very, very bottom line of being a book. And that's frustrating to watch and to see all of that garbage being thrown out there. And in this sea of voices that we've become, it's very hard to compete with the millions of other books and other authors out there now with all of that. And then on top of it, we have the grifters. And that's what they are. Let's all be real, okay? Let's all be real, y'all. The people who literally just enter in a prompt and then let ChatGPT or whatever flavor of AI you want to call it just crap out a manuscript, and then they throw it up there and call it a book and call it a day and do zero effort. I'm sorry, typing a prompt is not effort. Typing a prompt and then reading over your AI manuscript garbage and editing it, as I've seen people say, it is not a book. It's not, you have done no effort. You let a machine do it for you. And just because you happen to read over it and run spell check on it doesn't really mean anything. And if that makes you mad, then that makes you mad, and I'm not going to apologize for it, because being a writer, just number one, you have to actually do the writing, okay? You, the human, have to actually do the writing. And I know that then we come into the argument of ghostwriting and blah, 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 and that's a whole other topic. Just for now, y'all, just for sanity's sake. If you want to be a writer, you, the human, have to do the writing. You can have all the help you want. If you want to have beta readers, and you want to have proofreaders, and you want to have editors, and you want to have people, helping you with ideas, you want to be a part of workshopping it with other people, you want to have co-authors that are writing with you, blah, blah, blah. All of that is great. No, that's the other part of elitism that I'm going to get to in a minute, which is a very silly form of elitism. But you want to have other people contributing to the process and helping you? That is fantastic. In fact, writing is typically better if other people are in on it, so that at the very least, you have another pair of eyes look at it just to give you a reality check. Because I myself, one of my biggest flaws with my writing is that I don't always get everything out of my head and onto the page. And my friends and my beta readers and my editors are all so good about pointing that out, like, hey, we were over here and now we're over here, or hey, this transition doesn't make any sense, or this motivation doesn't make any sense, this character is just suddenly doing this now, and it's like, oh, oops, I completely forgot to explain that. I completely forgot that section of the character arc. Whoopsie. And that's why it's so important for you to do it yourself, because you're going to learn and grow so much. Like, when I look at my first novel as opposed to my sixth novel, worlds apart. So much better. And that's not to say that my first novel was bad, because it's not. It's just that is how it should be. You should grow with each book that you write. Each iteration should be better than the last. That lets you know that you're improving, you're growing, you're learning, all that good stuff. So that takes me to my next point of elitism. This one is rather new. I hadn't really seen it until like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and it's very weird, but I've been seeing it more and more. And at first I kind of laughed at it because it was just so absurd, but now it's becoming concerning, especially because, again, this contributes to all the trash that is being just, burying our community alive, essentially. It's making it so much more difficult to compete in the market because you have to compete with everybody else and trash, which sucks. So the next part of elitism is being alone on an island. And what that means is there is this very weird form of elitism that I've been seeing where authors will very proudly say that they refuse to hire an editor, which I understand not everyone can afford an editor. Not everybody has access to an editor, That's okay. It's not 100% required. It's great if you can, not required. But they won't hire an editor. They won't have beta readers. They won't even have a proofreader. They won't let anyone else look over their book until it's published. And here's the kicker, y'all. They won't edit it. They will write it from once upon a time to the end, all in one go. They won't look over it. They won't make any changes, just from here to here, and then they call it a book and they're done. Now, how this is different from just the lazy trash of not even trying to improve your book and this elitism is the attitude behind it. That they explain the reason why they do this is that they believe that if you are a real writer or a real author, that you have to do everything 100% yourself, and that your writing should be perfect from the get-go, that you shouldn't have to do iterations. You shouldn't have to have multiple drafts. You shouldn't have to have any sort of editing or proofreading or anything. It should just be magically perfect on the first try, which, I'm sorry, unless you're Jack Kerouac, that has never happened in the history of ever. And newsflash, we're pretty sure that he did actually edit it. It's just more fun to believe the legend. So yeah, that's just bonkers, bananas, crazy. Just thinking that somehow you are magically able to write perfectly every time and that it doesn't require any proofreading whatsoever. Now, I can honestly tell y'all, I'm a pretty good writer. Not to toot my own horn or anything, but, I've been around the block a few times. I kind of know what I'm doing. And I still edit the crap out of my manuscripts. Like, right now, I'm in the editing process for my 7th novel, Be Mine. And I can't tell y'all how many times I have caught some very silly mistakes in my manuscript. And this is true of all my manuscripts, is just going through the editing process and just finding things where I have put the wrong character's name or I've put the wrong tense. Like, instead of saying they went somewhere, I say they are going somewhere. I say it's the wrong time of day, where it's, oh, they're walking to class and it's morning, and then all of a sudden I say that it's nighttime in the next sentence. Just really silly, picky things like that. But, it's an easy thing to slip up on. It's an easy thing if you're not really paying attention. You're in the zone and you're in the scene and and you get lost in the sauce and all of that. Those are just silly, stupid mistakes that you catch when you're editing. Most importantly, one of the best editing techniques I can tell y'all is just sit there and read your manuscript out loud. You will catch all the dumb stuff. It's so amazing. You'll sit there and you'll start saying it out loud and you're like, that doesn't sound right. What's going on here? And so strange elitism where they think they are so magically perfect at writing that they don't even have to do basic editing is unrealistic and crazy. But here we are. And that also contributes to the trash, because even though they are putting in the work and they have the desire to be a good writer and write as the human, they're only meeting us part way. They're only meeting us part way in the journey. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, that even though their intention is good, they're not making it all the way, and so they're contributing to the trash. And that's really the message of this, is that the elitism contributes to the trash. It treats other writers like trash. And then on top of it, it just makes a very trashy attitude in a trashy community, because The last thing that you want, if you're a new writer, or even if you're an experienced writer and you're looking for some advice on something, and they come in with their do-to-do attitude, and they're like, ha ha ha, you should know this. Silly you. You're not a real writer. How do you not just magically, automatically know all these things? And everybody doesn't know everything. Like, let's not be rude. And while, yes, it is so irritating to see some of the same dumb questions over and over again, if they irritate you, just ignore them. Don't answer them. It's not needed. I mean, I can honestly tell y'all, I do not answer any of the questions that I see on those writing communities where it's like, how do I write a book? Google is free, my friend. But I'm not going to say that because that's mean and unnecessary. I'll say it here because it's my channel and I can do whatever I want here. But I'm not going to go out of my way to on people because that's not okay. At the end of the day, it's a community and you help where you can. And if you can't say anything nice and you can't be helpful, then don't say anything at all. That's my little piece of advice for the people that live in elitism land. The final bit of elitism that I've seen is really yucky and really ugly, and it's most prevalent, again, with the old guard, the older generation, but I do sometimes encounter writers and authors that are my own age, or worst yet, even younger than me, who do this, is the sexism, the racism, just all of the isms. And those things have no place in the writing community. They just don't. Again, books are for learning about other perspectives or learning about other walks of life. They're for learning. And you can't learn if your world scope is this big. You gotta open it up. That's the whole point of books, is to open up your worldview, to learn about other people, to learn about other parts of history, to learn about other cultures. It's about all of these wonderful things. Whether you're reading about them directly through nonfiction or you're reading about them indirectly through fiction that has different messages or different overtones or whatever. It's just so gross, especially when I see it in person. Oh my goodness, it is the worst when I see it in person at events. When I have men who come up to my booth and just treat me like I'm an idiot. And when I say, yes, indeed, I wrote all these books, and they scoff at me and go, oh, that's adorable. You think you can write. It's like, sir, where's your book? Where's your book? Show it to me. Because these are all my books. What do you got? Or when I see people who do that to Black authors or Latinx authors or LGBTQ authors or just any of the isms, we don't need that. We don't need that. We don't need it in the writing community. We just don't need it anywhere. We don't need any of that crap anywhere. Those are the 3 pillars of elitism that I've really been seeing in the community. And they're just not good. They just bring trash and negativity to the community. And we just don't need those things because you know what, y'all? Being a writer is hard enough as it is. It really is. Because we have people outside the community that think all sorts of trashy negative things about us. We don't need to do it to each other. I hope y'all found this video helpful. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.